A frustration that clients can often share with me is, I've applied for a graduate job, but they told me I need more experience. How does that work? My answer is always, you're probably not selling the experience that you do already have in the right way. Every graduate has more to say than you see on a typical CV. You have to bridge the gap between students and a job. And that's where I can help. I'm David Spencer, and this is the Media Mentor podcast. Over the last 20 years, I've been helping people advance their careers through practical advice and support. This podcast is where I share that advice, hear from people I have helped on their journey, and speak to colleagues and industry figures about the media industry and the often baffling world of recruitment. On this episode, I speak to Elise McGinley, a client who first came to me in the autumn of 2024, expressing frustration at a lack of job offers despite her master's degree. Like many clients, she was frustrated and downhearted and was seeking to unlock what was needed to land that first journalism job. After a couple of sessions and some online support, I received the loveliest of messages to say she had landed her dream role at BBC Radio Scotland. It's the best feeling to have helped play a small part in kickstarting her journalism career. And so I'm delighted she's my first guest on the Media Mentor podcast. Elise, thank you so much for talking to me on this podcast. What got you to get in touch, first of all? What was your mindset when you got in touch?
I had heard of the Media Mentor for quite a while beforehand, and I had been sort of keeping an eye on the website, keeping tabs on the jobs that were coming up just to see which ones were near me. A lot of the jobs I had found I did apply to, and I either didn't get word back or I had had an interview and I hadn't been successful. So I thought that I would just bite the bullet and speak to you about my CV, my cover letter, because I was working as a communications officer, and as much as it was a good job, I had my master's in journalism that I wanted to make use of.
And tell me about that sort of switch. So doing communications role, were you worried that you were going to be stuck in a communications path?
Yeah, that was sort of the main worry. It felt like I was going to have to leave the company anyway. So I thought, this isn't really what I want to be doing. So I think I need to just take the jump and go for it, because it's what I want to do. And I think if I did stay where I was, I would probably not be anywhere near as happy. And I definitely wouldn't be working for my dream company, and I guess the dream entry role for any sort of want to be journalist.
But that sort of decision is a brave one. I mean, we know that not everyone can necessarily do that, but that's what it can feel like, I guess. Coming back to early careers, a conversation I often have is, look, that first job or first couple of opportunities aren't going to be what you do forever, but it can, if you're a graduate, early 20s, feel like what you're going to do is going to set you off in that direction forever. So to make that decision would have been a brave one. And did that then open up the opportunity to go, okay, I don't have to just go for jobs, but I can also look to freelance, find my way into the industry that way?
What I had done, because I was very aware that I didn't want to stay in this communications job forever. So I had quite a healthy holiday package, and I wasn't really using them. So I kept back 2 weeks worth of holidays to use for any potential freelancing shifts that might crop up. I picked up a few working at the BBC in Glasgow, and it was just like here and there, sort of ad hoc. And then a job came up for the job that I had been working. I wasn't successful in the interview, but off of the back of the interview, I got a 10-week booking. And I thought, I'm only young once. Not everyone's lucky enough to take that jump. So I thought, why not? This is what I want to do. And it's paid off because I've been there for well over 10 weeks now.
And let's go back to some of the things that you had to reframe, is the way that I often talk about it. But let's think about how you presented yourself. So when you came to have that discussion, when you thought, let's look at this, it's not just about, okay, what I should do, what is the next step for me? Should I do this or should I do that? But also how you presented yourself. What were some of the things that you were concerned about, and what things changed in our conversations?
In our conversations, I sort of became aware of the generalizations that I was making in my CV and my cover letter. Although I was making good points, I wasn't quite hitting the niche areas of journalism that the type of job I wanted to get were looking for. So I guess that was one of the things. I think another big thing for me, which I struggle with in day-to-day life, is bigging myself up. I really have an issue with sort of talking myself up and selling myself. And I do great. I mean, here I am. I do kind of I do well at what I do, but right away I'm sort of like backtracking and going, oh, well, I can't say that because then I sound like I'm up myself, sort of thing. I think it was just a case of not coming across that way on paper and maybe having that little bit of an edge of confidence that I might not have in real life, but it's definitely good to have on paper. And you sort of brought that out and sort of helped me word things in a way that I might not have previously about myself.
It's a regular conversation I have with clients, because I think I always say to people, when we have that conversation, the arrogant people don't come to me to ask for help because they're able in some way to put that kind of thing down on paper. But of course, I wasn't talking about arrogance. I was talking about trying to be more assertive. And I always do that in my sessions, use that A word, difference, because it's not about arrogance. It's just being proud of what you do. But of course, it's then thinking, how do you turn that around? So having thought about that, the specifics, as you said, not being too general, you then get a sense of confidence about, well, I can do these things. And does it therefore not feel like the concern you have, and you said it quite eloquently, not to be too full of yourself? Did you feel that you got that balance right when you started to think about examples of work, situations, what you had done and what you'd started to do, even in the comms role, for example?
Yeah, I started to sort of see the journalistic point of view of the tasks that I had completed in my communications role. I started to think back on what I had achieved and think maybe that was quite a big deal. Maybe I should put that down on paper. Maybe I should think about doing that. But it wasn't sort of until we'd had those conversations that I thought that is something that I should put down on paper. And it's just even the basic skills. It's like researching and sort of showing your resilience. I think like having that conversation with yourself helped me realize that I have got a few more good qualities, shall we say, than I originally thought I did, journalistically and personally.
And also, it's remarkable how that transmits on paper and in applications. So again, you've said that perhaps in life in general, that's something you might struggle with in terms of bigging yourself up. We can't change necessarily how we are easily, but the point of using those examples and using situations and thinking much more about your skills is to be able to, on paper, just lift yourself off it a little bit more. And that obviously did that and had some effect.
Yeah, and I think even sort of down to the stories that I had worked on as well. You know, I've worked on quite a few breaking news stories that until we'd had those conversations, I didn't think to put in my CV. I didn't think that I should put the fact that I've worked on the news of Alex Salmond's death, the Trump election. There's been quite a lot of stories that I've worked on that have been quite big in the grand scheme of things. And even dating right back to my master's days when I was pulling together coursework, I was still working on big stories, although it wasn't paid, although it wasn't for a big corporation. It was still breaking news, and I hadn't thought to put that down.
It's such a important point to pick up on, because when we use phrases like trying not to be too general with skills, we then go, okay, how can we be more specific? So we don't want to say necessarily that we work well under pressure and to tight deadlines, because that's what everyone's going to say. And instead of those examples are doing exactly that. Big stories, tight deadlines, under pressure, they illustrate those things. So that's part of that process. And I think also what you said there about what you've done on your master's, a lot of the time I talk to clients who have just graduated and don't make enough of things that they do, even on an undergrad, but on a master's, because they have real value. They can be effectively real experience.
Absolutely. And I would sort of touch on the news days as being real experience. I would touch on, I guess, on my master's anyway. Every master's is different, but I went to Glasgow Caledonian University. For my master's, we were sent out. We had a day to get a story, whether it was TV, whether it was radio, whether it was print. You've got a day. You need to get something, otherwise the show's not going to run. And it has to be back in for 4 o'clock, and you have to be sent out at 9 o'clock, and you have to be back in, have it edited, and have it ready to go for 4 o'clock. That's tight news. You're running around Glasgow, you're speaking to the public, you're trying to get vox pops, you're a student journalist, you're trying to get big names to speak to a student journalist. It's a tough gig. It's a really tough gig.
Absolutely. Those things you do as students, which is horrible. Vox popping in the center of Glasgow, it's just a nightmare. I hate vox pops. But all of that experience, and it's harder as a student to find guests. So all of those skills you need to pull out. And I think it's really important not to undervalue stuff you do, because you mentioned, although it's not paid, doesn't matter. It's experience. It's part of your degree, and a master's will be a good degree. So pulling that experience out. Tell me, Elise, did that help you when you then came to interviews, because you were on paper talking about those experiences? Did that mean that front of mind you had those experiences and it was easier to talk about those, and you felt more able to kind of, in that sense, sell yourself?
Well, I think that before we'd had these conversations, because we've had a few now, sort of email, Zooms, I would say that until we'd had started having those conversations, I didn't think to prepare examples for an interview. I just thought that it would be there, and I would be able to sort of reach into the depths of my mind and pick examples out. And obviously under pressure, I don't know why I didn't think. I did prepare answers, but I didn't give examples along with those answers to show and to sort of showcase my skill set using examples. I would talk about my skill set, but I wouldn't say, oh, and this is because I did this, and this is because I did this story, and I covered this, which means that I had this skill. Do you know what I mean? I would say that after we'd had those conversations, it was like a switch flipped in my mind, and I thought, I need to really think about examples and how I can tie in the job advert with the work that I've done and the work that I've produced. And I know it's so silly. It sounds silly saying it now, but
Well, I don't think you're alone. That's the thing, because sometimes people are thinking the job is about the skills, literally the qualification or the skills, and less about some of those things that they've done. I mean, I always say there are a lot of people with a degree, whether, there are fewer with masters, but still there are people that have done the same degree as you. What marks you apart is how you did the things as part of that, and the things you did as part of that to prove that you are hireable. And particularly at a graduate early career stage, you're bridging that gap. And people will say, well, I've applied for a job that was a graduate job, but they told me I need a bit more experience. So how does that work? And normally I'll say, well, you're probably not selling the skills that you have from your degree enough to bridge that gap, because we know a graduate is not a finished article. We just need to know you could go to the center of Glasgow, find a story, do some vox pops, think about stuff. And also, think about stuff that matters in a news story. All of that comes from those experiences, and articulating that fills the gap for the hirer to go, Elise really knows what they're doing, and had those examples. So I'm so proud of that journey that, I've seen you do, because you have the skills, you had all the ability, you'd done that master's. So it was just a little bit of reshaping. How does it feel now to have made that step? And, the smile on your face, I've insisted this Media Mentor podcast will not be video. Sorry for anyone who was expecting that. But the smile on your face tells me you're enjoying the work. How does it feel to be doing kind of what on that course at Glasgow you were imagining that you might be able to do?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I've just had goosebumps all over my body just thinking of it. As cringy as it is. I mean, the person that I was when I started my master's in September 2022 and the person that I am now are two very, very different people in the best way possible. Because over the course of time, I've sort of given myself that extra push. I've been a little bit more ambitious than maybe I would have been back in the day. I've sort of been hammering on the door. Well, as you know, because I did say this, I have been hammering on the door of the BBC in Scotland and at Glasgow Pacific Quay since I graduated in November of 2023. So to say that I am buzzing with the fact that I've got the job that I wanted, it feels like an understatement, really. Every day I'm like, I wonder what I'll cover today. I wonder who I'll talk to today. I come home from work and I speak to my mum and my gran. I live with them. And my gran's like, who did you speak to today? Tell me about your day. What stories were you covering? And it's just like the house, it just seems so much happier because I mean, I have to say, I was quite miserable working the comms job because I was very aware that I don't think that it was a dead end job, but it felt like a dead end job because it wasn't what I wanted to do. So I think taking that jump has definitely made me so much happier all round. And yeah, I couldn't have made the jump without you.
Well, it's lovely hearing that story because also that enthusiasm, excitement, and energy about doing that. What story am I going to do today is so different to when you get to my age, Elise, and you're going, oh, what story am I going to be doing today? I'm joking. I can be old and cynical. Honestly, that energy is so beautiful to hear because I think it's great for people like me who've been doing this for quite a long time to feel that energy and be reminded how fun, engaging, brilliant this job can be in the toughest of times often. And so I think I'm, delighted you're doing it. And as I said, really, really proud. Elise, thank you so much for being one of the first guests on the Media Mentor podcast. It's been so lovely speaking to you. And you know that I'm going to keep an eye on the rest of your career for as long as I can.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And thanks again for saying that you're proud. It's a nice thing to hear.
Isn't she fab? Elise McGinley on landing her dream job. And so much of what Elise talked about there is key for graduates to consider, but also those of you later in your careers. Demonstrable skills are vital in media applications, but actually more widely. Imagine if you're a police officer and your CV just says, I arrest people and enforce the law. No S. Sherlock, that's your job. Don't just tell me the obvious stuff. Show me how you do your job well and effectively. If you want help lifting your CV and cover letters off the page, like Elise did, then get in touch via the mediamentor.info. I do online sessions of 30 minutes or an hour with lower prices for students and recent graduates. I also do interview prep, evaluate show reels and demos, and offer voice coaching and training sessions on news writing. Remember to keep an eye on the website for jobs across all the sectors we cover, and there's a WhatsApp channel where all the new jobs get shared as they drop with a direct link. You'll find the link for that if you click on the WhatsApp icon on the website mediamentor.info. Thank you to Elise for giving me her time and chatting about her experience in media so far. To Mrs. Mentor, of course, for the tireless and hard work keeping the feed going and the website refreshed. And to Josh Sommer for producing this music for me. And thank you for listening. Remember to click follow on your podcast player to keep up to date with the latest episodes. And if you want, write a review if you love what you hear.